Hello everyone, welcome to a very quick review on fractions. Now over here on the left side I have our four operations: adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing with fractions. And I'll show you how to do each one. And on the right side I have two items here. They're not necessarily operations for fractions, but they do deal with fractions. So let's go ahead and let's actually get started with adding fractions. Now, when we add or subtract fractions, we need to make sure that they have common denominators. In other words, their denominators need to be the same. So when I'm looking at these denominators, I'm trying to see, okay, can I turn one of them into the other? Or am I going to have to change both of them into a different number entirely? It just so happens that 4 and 2, or rather 2, can turn into 4 by being multiplied by 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the denominator by 2 to turn it into a 4. But when I am converting fractions, I need to make sure that whatever I do to the denominator, I also do to the numerator as well. And this is just to make sure that we keep the fraction with the same value. Because when I'm actually multiplying the numerator and denominator by 2, I'm actually multiplying the whole fraction by 2 over 2, or 2 divided by 2. So really, I'm technically just multiplying by 1. All right, so here's what we get. 2 times 1 in the numerator becomes 2, and 2 times 2 in the denominator becomes 4. So 1/2 is 2/4 as a fraction. Now I can go ahead and add 3/4 to that, and because I have common denominators, I can add my numerators together and write it all over that denominator. So final answer for 1/2 plus 3/4 is 5/4. All right, so like I mentioned earlier, subtracting fractions is very similar to adding fractions. We need to make sure that we have common denominators. But the problem here is that 8 and 3 are not necessarily factors of each other. I can't turn 3 into an 8 so readily. So what I'm going to have to do is I will actually have to convert both of these fractions. And how I do that, I multiply by the other denominator. So I'm going to multiply the 8 with a 3. And of course, because I do that in the denominator, I also need to make sure that I multiply by 3 in the numerator as well. Now, the fraction that has a 3, I'm going to multiply the denominator there with an 8. And I'm going to also multiply the numerator with an 8 as well. So what this looks like is 3 times 7, that becomes 21. Divided by 3 times 8, that is 24. And what I'm subtracting is 2 times 8 in the numerator, that becomes 16, divided by 3 times 8 in the denominator, which is 24. So now we have 21 24ths minus 16 24ths. Now I just subtract the numerators from each other. 21 minus 16 is 5, all divided by 24. So final answer, 5/24. All right, now when we multiply fractions, this one I would say is the most straightforward operation, because when we multiply fractions, all we need to do is just multiply the numerators together and multiply the denominators together. So what we actually get is 1 times 3 is simply just 3. And 2 times 4 in the denominator is 8. So 1/2 times 3/4 is 3/8. All right, final operation with fractions is dividing with fractions. Now, when I say dividing with fractions, it doesn't matter if you have a fraction in the numerator or a fraction in the denominator. The idea is that one of these items is a fraction. Now, when we are dividing with fractions, whatever number you have in the denominator, we're going to reciprocate that, even if it's a whole number. So if it was a whole number in the denominator here, for example, if it said 1/2 divided by a whole number 3, you would need to change that 3 into a fraction by writing 3 divided by 1 so that we can reciprocate it. But in this particular case, I actually already have a fraction. So I'm going to go ahead and what I'll do is I will take that 1/2 and I'm now going to multiply it with the reciprocal of 3/4, which is 4/3. And then just like earlier, because I'm multiplying fractions, I multiply straight across. 4 times 1 is 4 in the numerator, divided by 2 times 3, which is 6 in the denominator. All right, and last but not least, what I need to do here is to quickly simplify. 4 divided by 6, both numerator and denominator are divisible by 2. So I'm going to go ahead and do exactly that. Divide numerator and denominator by 2. And we get our final answer to be 2/3, or 2 divided by 3. All right, so one of those items that wasn't necessarily an operation was simplifying fractions. I technically just showed everybody how to do it, but let's go ahead and let's do this one more time. Now, when you're simplifying fractions, what you're looking for is common factors. It's best if you can find the greatest common factor, or basically it's the largest number that divides both the numerator and the denominator. However, if you don't readily recognize the largest common factor, it's okay. Just pick a number that you know will divide both numerator and denominator, and then continue to do so until until there are no longer any common factors. So for this particular example, 12 divided by 18, I actually know for a fact that 12 is divisible by 6, and so is 18. So if I go ahead and divide both numerator and denominator by 6, we get a 2 in the numerator divided by 3 in the denominator. So 12/18 is the same as 2/3 when reduced. All right, last but not least, we have proportions. Now, proportions are really just two fractions that are equal to each other, or two ratios that are equal to each other. And when we work with proportions, what we need to do is we need to cross multiply. So when we cross multiply, we take the denominator of one ratio and multiply it to the numerator of the other, and vice versa. So what we end up with is A times D on one side of the equation is equal to B times C on the other side of the equation. So when we see two fractions, or when we have a setup that has two ratios with an equal sign in between, this is when we cross multiply. All right, so that's it for your fraction review. Thank you very much for watching.